Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is Robert Brинkerhoffe. I am speaking to you from Kalamazoo, Michigan, in the United States. I want you to know that it is a very cold day here, and there is snow blowing past my window. I hope that the weather in Moscow is better. I had a chance many years ago to visit your beautiful country. I was in Moscow and Nizhny Novgorod and St. Petersburg, and I enjoyed it very much. I'm happy to join you today. As you probably know, I am a partner with Promote International. Um, I had been retired, but when I met the people from Promote and saw the innovative work that they are doing to revolutionize how we get impact from training, I decided to leave my retirement and to join them. And so I am now a part of that. And I want to talk to you today about the work I've been doing with them around high performance learning journeys. Um, so I'm going to start by very quickly reviewing some of the research that led us up to today, where I can tell you about the learning journeys. Back about 40 years ago, um, training was in what I would call the first generation, where we were primarily focusing just on a learning event. And our thinking was that if we could make a learning event excellent, if we could provide good instruction, if we could have great instructors and a very good venue and the right sort of media, that we would get good results for performance. But the reality is that that sort of approach, our research was showing, was getting less than a 15% impact rate. For every 100 people who went through training like that was event only about 15 of them ever used their training in a way that made a difference to their business. So the research we did in high impact learning was all about how we could get better results from training. And so what we did, we focused very much on the before and the after of the event, because our research showed that what happened before people came to training and what happened after they left it had much more to do with whether the training would work than the quality of the training event itself. So we built tools and methods to help people align the training with the business results, to get managers engaged, to get people aligned and focused on performance results. And then we made sure that there were tools provided after the training to support performance improvement. This was a great leap forward, and it is the way that many people are doing training now. However, even when it was difficult to scale that to large audiences. And what we found is that that sort of approach was getting 40, 50, sometimes 60% impact rates, but still not enough to make the performance improvement that we knew we would need from training. So the next generation was to think about how can we break that training event into pieces and make it, break it into smaller pieces. And when we began to break it into pieces, and each piece of that training was smaller, delivered through technology, and preceded by people doing some work first, engaging their manager, and followed by practice sessions, that sort of a learning journey approach was getting better than 80% impact rate. So what I want to talk to you about is, what is that learning journey approach and how does it work? And in order to understand how and why it works, we need to understand what I call the anatomy of impact. That is, when training works, what happens? And I'm going to pause just a moment here for translation. All right, I am going to start up again, if that's all right. And what I wanted to tell you is that in order to make sure that we understand how and why a learning journey works, we need to understand what happens when training works. So I want to walk you quickly through what our research showed. When training works, what happened? What we know is, so in other words, when we provided training, what happened when people get impact from training, what was it that happened? So if you'll take a look at this graphic, on the left-hand side of the graphic, you see the learning intervention. Then the small circles to the right of that learning intervention represent the skills or the knowledge or the learning outcomes. Then the larger box to the right of those small circles represent a person's job or a team's job. And the smaller boxes inside that represent the parts of the job. Now, I'm going to stop a moment for translation there, and then I'll start up again. So what happens when we get impact is that the reality is that some parts of a job have more to do with getting results that the organization needs than others. So every job is made up of smaller parts. There are parts of your job, there are parts of my job. And depending on what the business needs from my job, there are some parts of my job that I need to do better in order to produce the results that my organization needs. So when we get impact from training, it's because someone took some part of their training, something they learned from their training, and they used it in a part of their job that if they did that part of their job better, then it would produce a result that the business needs. So impact happens when somebody uses something that they learned in a part of their job that if that part of the job were done better, then it would produce a result that the business needs. I'll pause for translation here for a moment. So let me just review that again, that concept very quickly, that impact from training, value to the business, is not achieved by those people who learn everything in a training intervention, but it is achieved by those people who use something that they learn in a way that can make a difference to the business. So business impact happens when people use their training in a way that can make a difference. They use their training in a part of their job that can make a difference. So that is, impact happens when there's an intersection, when something that somebody learned in their training, they also use in a moment that matters. That is, an event a part of their job when, if they were to do that part better, it would make a business result that the training needs. So it isn't just using training anyway, in any way possible. It's using training in a way that can make a difference in a moment that matters. A moment that matters is a part of your job that needs to be done better to get a result that the business needs. And if you do that, if you use your training well in that moment that matters, then we will get impact. And that is something that we call not just regular transfer, but leveraged transfer. And I'm going to wait just a moment here for some translation again. So the challenge is, how can we design training? How can we deliver learning journeys in such a way that we can raise the probability that those intersections will happen more consistently and reliably? At present, if we're doing event-based training, we're not using learning journeys. If we're just doing event-based training, those intersections happen only randomly, and they don't happen enough of the time. If we want impact from training, we have to be sure that those moments that matter where training can be used will happen consistently and reliably. How can we make them happen? The way we do that is with a learning journey approach, but it has to be an approach that isn't just focused on learning, but it has to be an approach that is based on performance improvement. And so the breakthrough in a high performance learning journey is that we don't just concentrate on helping people learn more, but we put a lot of effort into making sure that they know exactly when and how and why they can use their learning in a way that will benefit their organization and their business. So that's what we call a high performance learning journey, and it has 4 elements or key components. It has, first, committing to the journey, that people have to understand, if I do join this training, if I take the time to learn and apply this, what good will it do for me? How will it help me? Why should I bother to commit to this journey? So we need to help people commit to the journey. Then we need to help them learn and understand new concepts, new tools, new methods. Then we have to provide them application opportunities. They need to be able to practice and to try that out. And they need to try it out increasingly more and more in ways in their job that will make a difference. So much of this learning and applying and practice happens not in the learning event space, but in the job place. So people learn while they're working and they practice on the job. And then finally, the learning journey has to finish with sustaining performance, with people being able to sustain their performance and use it independently. I'm going to pause there for a moment before I look at some of the research data for some translation. So to quickly summarize that the learning journey has to continue into the workplace, and it has to help people identify the moments that matter, the parts of their job where they can use their training. And that will vary from individual to individual. So this has to be personalized to each individual performer. And when we have a learning journey, what we will have then is many cycles. I've just shown a few on this chart, but many cycles of learning something new, trying it in the workplace, reflecting on it, then adding to my knowledge, then trying something new again and reflecting on how well it worked, adding that to my knowledge, trying it again, practicing it again. And as time goes by, the challenge of the workplace increases. That is, we make sure that the early practice is in a sheltered environment, and then we make sure that people begin to migrate their practice into their actual workplace, and they apply their learning in increasingly challenging scenarios until they have now a good, robust, solid performance base where they feel and they know that they can use their training in any way that comes up. I'll pause there briefly, and now we'll have a look at the impact data. All right, let me just summarize. So what is a high performance learning journey? A high performance learning journey, I'll give you a moment to read that. And let me point out a couple of key elements of this statement. One is that a learning journey is technology supported. It's possible to do a high performance learning journey without technology, but it's extremely difficult. So all of the research we've done is with technology supported learning journeys, performance journeys. It also has many cycles of practice, of learning, practice, applying, and reflecting. Many cycles. It is done at a natural pace, and it helps people move from practicing their training, maybe in a role play, in a workshop, to trying their training in an easier part of their job, and then getting increasingly more difficult in their job. And the learning journey supports them all the way through that, and it may take several months. No more do we rely on a one-day or a two-day workshop alone to change performance. It can't possibly work that way. So let me conclude with the question that many people want to know. They say, gee, that sounds good about a high performance learning journey, but does it work? Does it really make a difference? The answer to that is yes, it does. How do we know that? Because we have done several studies. We continue to do impact studies on a regular basis of people using high performance learning journeys. But let me talk to you about a recent study. This was 7 companies in 7 different industries, more than 600 participants, and more than 400 managers of those participants involved. And those industries varied from production to aircraft, uh, to banking, to construction. Many different types of industries were represented. And as I said, more than 600 participants. Um, and what we did is we studied, were they getting any impact from training? Were they using their training in a way that made a measurable difference to the business? That was the first question. Secondly, was that impact sustained? Were they able to continue to use their learning, or did they use it only once and then it went away? So as we began to look at that data, here's what we discovered: that more than 80% of the participants, in fact, used their learning in a way that had a positive impact on their business. So in a way that improved sales or improved profits or reduced cycle time or reduced defects in quality or increased the speed of project completion. So important outcomes to the business. People were using their learning in a way that could make a contribution to those. The next question was, how sustained was that impact? Were they doing this on a regular basis, or were they just using their training very rarely? And the answer there was it was highly sustained, that at least 70% of them said it was very regularly sustained, and another 27% said it was mostly sustained. So in interviewing them and in surveying them and observing their work, we saw that it was largely sustained, the impact was. And then the final bit of information from the impact study was, I think, probably the most important. Some of these companies were relatively new to high-performance learning journeys. Others of the companies were what we would call veterans. They had been using a high-performance learning journey approach, and we had been working with them for more than 2 or 3 years. So what we saw was that the high-performance learning journey methodology drives a learning to performance culture. The companies that were newest at using high-performance learning journeys got the lowest results, only about a 62% impact rate. But as they got more proficient with using learning journeys over time, that rate ranged from 62% all the way up to 91%, and it was very, very consistent. And so what that taught us was that it takes time to help an organization adopt the learning journey culture. They have to get used to saying that learning is going to be a month-long process, not a day-long process. So it's about sustaining it. And when we know that it can be sustained, and it is sustained, people get much better at it. So that concludes my presentation. I know that my friends there at BIRC can answer your questions about high-performance learning journeys. How do you use more? How do you learn more about them? How can you get more information? So here you have that information. Best wishes to all of you, and thank you for taking the time to join with us today. Thank you, and goodbye. Best wishes to all.